we would continue where Ash and his friends would be celebrating his win at the Evergrande conference, and how far Brendan went in the Evergrande conference, mainly Ash's win. And then Dealey and Professor Birch would go off some night ago and continue discussing their business and talk about Ash's win and the future of Littleroot Town. And then Brandon would approach Ash and his friends and would ask Ash what he should do now. And Ash would say he doesn't have an answer for him. And let me tell you the backstory between Ash and Brandon. Like I explained in episode 1 essentially, but let me go a bit in depth. Because I didn't go so much in depth. A long time ago, when they were both children, Ash and Brandon had the same dream to become a Pokemon master and become one of the best trainers of all time. Ash had this dream, but he didn't have the resources to begin chasing it early. But Brandon, being the son of Professor Birch, Hoenn's lead in Pokemon research, had the resources right in front of him to get a head start in front of Ash, and he went on to do so. He learnt about Pokemon, he learnt about battling, and by the time he was the age of 9, 1 year before the age of a Pokemon trainer, he knew more than an average adult Pokemon trainer. A lot more. But when he reached the age of 10, his knowledge made him virtually undefeatable. No one could defeat him. He was undefeated, essentially. But when Ash began to catch up to him, and I dare say even surpass him, when he saw signs of Ash catching up to him and even surpassing him, especially in their draw, he trained harder than ever. But then in their next battle, he was the catalyst for Ash to begin training even more seriously than he had ever before. His jeering and mocking had pushed Ash beyond the edge, and he began to train seriously. And this ultimately led to his loss at the Evergrande Conference. After losing to the Evergrande Conference, he broke down and began crying because he had never been defeated and didn't know how to acknowledge it. And he was in pure shock that the person who was always behind him in Pokemon training, the person who was always behind him, pretty much, had beaten him. The knowledge that he gained as a child gave him an inflated and cocky personality, because he was far ahead of most people his age and even most Pokemon trainers who are much older than him. It made him more like Gary, if not worse, if not more annoying, because he got into Pokemon at a very early age. At like 1 year old, no, not one, at 3 or 4 years old, he was already learning about Pokemon. This caused him to have an inflated and cocky personality, that he is the best, no one can beat him. Then when he lost in the Evergrande Conference to the last person on Earth he thought could beat him, he was in pure shock and couldn't believe it and couldn't handle the truth and broke down. But then Ash explained to him and showed him and taught him that just because he got an early start to Pokemon and got a lot more experience than most people older than him, he is no better than anyone else, and is just as good as any other trainer, and shouldn't think that he's better than anyone because he just got a few more bits of information about Pokemon and has never lost a battle before. Ash was showing him humility by beating him and telling him that he shouldn't feel bad about his loss and should only learn from it. And after this sort of conference, Brandon was in a dilemma. He didn't know what to do. Unlike Gary, he had his interest in Pokemon lied within battle. So, just to get it out there, there's no way that he's ever going to become a Pokemon research. He had spent the time that he came in Pallet Town before the party began thinking about his future, and he came to the conclusion that he wants to be a Pokemon master like Ash. But he didn't know how to do it or what to do. But then he got the bright idea to go and ask Ash himself, his rival and friend, because after the Evergrande conference they became friends again. So going back to the story, Brandon would ask Ash what he should do, and Ash would say that he is going to Johto, and he is going to go there and explore the region where one of his greatest rivals, Jimmy, came from. The person who gave him his amazing final battle in the league. And he's also going because he knows youngster Jonathan will be there. And he wants to learn more about the region. And then Brandon would have an idea. He would thank Ash for the explanation, and he would immediately rush into Professor Birch's lab, which was also near his home. Which was a big mansion. Actually, no, it wasn't. Which he knew, and he would go inside, and Ash would wonder what was going on. But anyway, we'll continue with the festivity, and we'll continue getting praise from the residents of Littleroot Town. After the party finished, the trio would go back to Ash's house and would rest there. And Ash and his friends would go to Professor Birch to go and ask how Brandon is doing, and for Ash to leave some Pokemon behind in preparation for Johto. And Ash and his friends would go and they would ask Professor Birch about Brandon. And Professor Birch would say that Brandon woke up very early in the morning and departed to Johto in a separate ferry called the SS Aqua to Johto. He woke up very early and left all his Pokemon here other than Sceptile, and left. I should say, I guess I inspired him. And speaking of leaving Pokemon here, Professor Birch, the real reason why I came here was to ask you which Pokemon I should leave behind for my journey to Johto. Professor Birch would look at all of Ash's Pokemon, and he would say that he should leave behind Linoon, Hariyama, and Tentacruel. And Ash would ask why he should leave those three behind. And then Professor Birch would say, Ash, obviously you're going to take Agron with you to Johto since it's your starter. And Ash would say, of course. And why the other two? And then Professor Birch would say, Ash, Crobat and Houndoom are Pokemon from the Johto region. They were first discovered in Johto, and they were first inputted in Johto's Pokedex. I think it would be interesting taking Johto Pokemon to Johto and for them to discover their home. I mean, where they were discovered and their origin. And Ash would say, that's a great idea, Professor. And he would hand Linoon, Hariyama's and Tentacruel's Pokeballs and would give them to Professor Birch. And he would say, take care of these three Pokemon well, Professor. And Birch would say, I shall, Ash. And Ash would only have 3 Pokeballs left. The trio would leave the lab and depart. But before anything, the trio would think about taking their trusty boat with them. And in the end, they would decide to take it, just in case. And then, the Saint Anne would arrive. Yes, it was stated that the Saint Anne travel in the games, where it was called the SSN, stated that it travels all over the world. So, I'm going to say that the Saint Anne travelled to Johto, was travelling to Johto, was travelling to Hoenn, and then it was going to travel back to Johto, and then it was going to travel back to Kanto, and then it will travel to Sinnoh and the other regions. So this would be the perfect opportunity for Ash. And Ash would board the Saint Anne, or SS Anne, whatever you want to call it. We're calling it the Saint Anne, being loyal to the anime. The trio would be having fun in the festivities, meeting people, eating delicious food, battling trainers, but then they would notice something. They would notice Team Rocket try to steal everyone's Pokemon and everything. They would notice a group with R's printed on their suits, and they would wonder who they are. But knowing Ash and his friends, you know that they won't just stand by and let some crazy team steal people's Pokemon. So Ash would use Crobat against Raticate, which would intrigue the Grunt, wondering how someone from Hoenn can have a Johto Pokemon. Ash would command for a Sludge Bomb and a Wing Attack, and these 2 attacks would easily take down the Raticate. After that, 2 Grunts would approach Ash, and Brawly would step next to Ash to battle with him. Brawly would send out his newly evolved Machamp, since it evolved only a few parts ago, I'm pretty sure, and Ash would send out his Crobat. Machamp would easily take out the giant rat Pokemon. Meanwhile, Crobat would take out its pre-evolution. And then they would notice a woman with pink long hair and green earrings, wearing a white getup. A white top with long black gloves and a short dress and long black socks with some with some black shoes, and a man with blue short hair with green eyes wearing a blue top with a red R imprint. A white top with a blue R, a red R imprinted, with black gloves, a purple belt with a white buckle in the middle, white trousers, and long black boots, and a meowth which could mysteriously talk. Ash and Bunny would question the trio, and they would reveal themselves to be part of Team Rocket: Jesse, James, and Meowth. In this alternate timeline, Jesse, James, and Meowth didn't meet Ash, so this should be a new encounter for Ash. So Jesse and James would use their signature Pokemon from Kanto, Weezing and Arbok. Meanwhile, Brawly and Ash would use Machamp and Crobat. Machamp, despite being at a disadvantage, would easily defeat Weezing. Meanwhile, Crobat would defeat Arbok. And it would turn out that a thunderstorm would be happening, and that everyone had to evacuate the ship. Brawly, Ash, and Flannery would smile at each other, knowing that that it was going to be easy for them to leave. They would swim all the way out of the SSN. They would break out and swim out of the SSN, and then they would get out their boat, climb into it, and they would swim their way to shore. It would take them a while, but then they would find themselves in a big green city, with lots of buildings. Ash would ask, "Hey guys, do you think we're in Johto?" But Brawly would answer, "Well, it doesn't look like Hoenn." Flannery would say, "I don't know, but it might be." They would make their way around the town, but then they noticed a lab, and they would walk inside, remembering that before they left, Professor Birch told them to go and talk to another professor, a gentleman called Professor Birch, who lives in a lab in a place called New Barktown. The trio would wonder if this was the place, but would still make their way inside, where they would find Professor Birch and his tartars. Professor Birch, in this timeline, without needing to go and find Totodile, whichever style it was, their meeting with Professor Birch would be brief. Professor Elm, oh my god, would be brief. And they would just introduce themselves as people from Hoenn. And Professor Elm would say that he and Professor Birch were very good friends of each other, being desk mates when they were studying to be professors under Oak. So they had a very good relationship. And the meeting would be brief. And in this timeline, Jimmy already would have taken the Cyndaquil. And actually, the same would be with the Chikorita and the Totodile. Because I'll say that meanwhile Ash was adventuring in Hoenn, like in the original timeline, but a bit different. Jim, like when Ash started his journey, Jimmy already was on his 4th badge or so. Was already challenging the Johto League, and made his way to Hoenn after the Johto League, where he came in the top 8. And he would make his way to Hoenn and breeze through the Hoenn League's gyms with his Johto team. And would make it to the Pokemon League. And since he had more experience than most of the trainers there, other than Ash, since he was stronger than most of the trainers there, other than Ash and Brandon, he would have found his time in the league very easy until he came across Ash, who would actually beat him and go on to become the winner. So that means that Marina and the other guy, I forget the names of the other characters who got the Totodile and the Chikorita. Yeah, the guy who battled Ash with his Meganium, yeah? Those guys already would have came and taken the Chikorita and Totodile. And Professor Elm would still be trying to get a new batch of starters. Yeah, and also, yeah. But I will also say that Professor Birch had also just finished a batch of starters. And this batch of starters were taken by Casey, yeah, like the Electabuzz fan, and the other people. And a few other people. I won't say the name of these trainers because they're not important to the plot of this What If, so yeah. I might mention them in the future, but they're not important right now. But anyway, their meeting with Elm would be very, very brief. And they'll just leave, and Ash would run into Casey along with Flannery and Brawley. Ash, yeah, I believe would still be a fan of baseball. I would still have the same conversation with Casey as he did in Canada. I love that conversation, especially when Ash roasts the Electabuzz. Oh, it cracks me up every time. But anyway, yeah, the conversation would be exactly the same. I think just because Ash was born in Hoenn, it doesn't mean that he won't still be a Pokemon baseball fan. So the conversation would go the same. And Casey would be a starting out trainer, like she was in the original timeline. And Casey would start with her Rattata. And Ash would think. And he would decide to use the weakest Pokemon in his arsenal right now in his team. And he would use Crobat. Crobat was only barely the weakest. Ash would be considering that. But so he would just send out Crobat. And he would ask Crobat to use a Sludge Bomb without even trying. And even when Crobat didn't even try, it would poison Rattata and it would run around in pain, eventually being knocked out. Be a rather comedic scene. Casey would be annoyed and would then send out Pidgey. Casey's Pidgey would try to use a Gust, which wouldn't even scratch Crobat. Crobat would float there, completely unaffected by the attack. And then, when Crobat barely swiped its wing, it would send Pidgey flying into a tree, knocking it out. And then Casey would be like, "Oh, you're so unfair. How can your Pokemon be so strong? Why are you using strong Pokemon against my against me and my young Pokemon? I should say, I'm sorry, Casey, but it's the only Pokemon I have right now. I came from the Hoenn region and I won the championship. So these are the only Pokemon I have right now. And then Casey would send out her Chikorita. And how do I say this in the best way possible? Chikorita would get absolutely annihilated. Chikorita would try to use a Razor Leaf, but it wouldn't even do a single thing to Crobat. To make it worse, it was quad resistant to the Razor Leaf. And when Crobat just slightly spat out a bit of poison, Chikorita would be poisoned. Chikorita would fall on the floor in pain, squirming in agony until finally being knocked out. Oh, Casey would be mad to say, it wasn't fair. You won the Hoenn League, and you're here bringing yourself with your Pokemon to battle me. It wasn't fair. I was doomed to lose from the beginning, and I should say, I'm sorry, but it was you who demanded for the battle, so you can't blame me. And he would return his Crobat. And the events of the entire Heracross episode would go the same, and he would catch Heracross. And also, in this series, I'm gonna be glossing over the filler, except some, which happened in Johto, because Johto had the most filler. And when I was watching Johto for the first time, it made me wanted to stop watching the entire Pokemon anime because it was so boring. The filler was so bad, if I'm being honest. But of course, my love for Pokemon persevered, and I still kept watching Johto because at the end of all the filler stuff, there was a lot of interesting stories, like when Ash fought. Like interesting parts, like when Ash met Gary and Umbreon, when Ash went into the Pokemon League, when Ash beat all the gym leaders. Oh my god, especially how Ash beat Price. I loved how Ash revived Price's Piloswine. Like when I saw Price, I felt so bad for the guy. And when Ash went and got his old buddy Piloswine back for him, I couldn't help but just smile. Anyway, Ash would capture Heracross the same. He would get Chikorita the same. And then we would flash to the battle with Faulkner. Ash would use Chikorita like in cannon, but the young flying type would easily defeat Chikorita. And Faulkner would say that he's quite excited to battle Ash because he saw the Evergrande Conference and how Ash defeated Jimmy in the way that he did. And Jimmy was one of his most challenging challengers. And when he saw Ash, he was excited for the battle. But with Ash making choices like using a Chikorita against the flying type, it would make him question why he came first in the Evergrande Conference, and this would get under Ash's skin. And Ash would say, I was just trying to get my Chikorita experience. Now I'll show you power. Go, Crobat! And Faulkner would say, oh, Crobat, a flying type. Alright. Hoot Hoot, use Peck. But of course, the more experienced Bat Pokemon would dodge and would use the Sludge Bomb, easily finishing the Hoot Hoot. After that, Faulkner would send out his Dodrio. Dodrio would jump up and use fly. It would be very similar to... Its jumping would be very similar to flying. And it would catch Crobat off guard a few times, but wouldn't do much damage. The more experienced massive bat Pokemon. And in the end, Crobat would finish it off with one wing attack. After that, Faulkner would send in his Pidgeot. This battle would be a lot more even than the other two. It would be a battle of powerful Sky Pokemon. It would be an amazing aerial battle. Wing attacks collided. It would be a spectacle, truly a spectacle. But in the end, when it came down to a clash of wing attack and wing attack, Crobat would come out on top. Ash would have won his badge earlier, his Zephyr badge, a lot faster than it did originally. Ash would return Crobat, and Faulkner would apologise for the comments he said earlier, saying he was just that he got a bit too invested into the battle, and Ash would say it's alright, and would say that he would have said the same comments if the roles were reversed. And Ash would receive his Zephyr badge. I would make his way out of Violet City. And then, when they would go exploring the area, Ash would, and his Pokemon would go into an extremely hot area. And then they would meet a girl and her Ninetales. And the girl would say, this is the Blaze Biome. This is an area where Fire-type Pokemon come and get stronger, and where some trainers leave their Fire-type Pokemon to come here and train. There is an area here where you can catch wild Pokemon, and an area where you can train Fire-type Pokemon. And the girl would introduce herself as Alicia, a fire-type specialist. And Flannery would be intrigued. I would say, oh, fire-type specialist. Must be like, you're like me. I'm the fire-type gym leader of Loveridge Town. And then Alicia would say, oh yeah, I've heard of you. You were beaten by so many challenges, and then you went on a journey around the Hoenn region to go and train. And now you're here. Yeah, your dad is now the gym leader there. And Flannery would get a bit offended when Alicia said, oh, you were easily beaten by every one of your trainers at your gym, and then you went away to go and train. And Flannery wouldn't be so excited to battle her like she used to be. And then Ash would say, wow, a place of fire-type Pokemon. And I presume that you're the one who even orchestrated this place. And Alicia would say, no, my grandpa is the one who came to this place many years ago and set it up as an area for fire-type Pokemon. There were already fire-type Pokemon living here, but he made it a place for fire-type Pokemon to train. And right here, the massive volcano up there, it gives every fire-type Pokemon near it 10 times as much power as it had before, especially if you train near it. And Ash would say, alright, I'm going to show you my strong fire type. Go Houndoom! Ash's Houndoom would look at Ninetales, and without Ninetales even using a single move, Houndoom would be in love with the female Ninetales. Since Houndoom was a guy, Houndoom would be like, Houndoom, Houndoom, Houndoom. And then, Ash would try to command his Houndoom to use a crunch, but Houndoom would just be infatuated by Ninetales, and Alicia would get the first move commanding for a Flame Wheel, which would do a lot more damage than anticipated. But Ash's Houndoom was quite a durable Pokemon. But Houndoom, the infatuation this time would be real and natural, since both Pokemon were in the same egg group. And yeah, so Houndoom wouldn't even be able to attack, and Ninetales would just constantly bombard it with attacks until the Dark Fire Dog fainted. Ash would have lost the battle, and Alicia would say, "Wow, from what I've seen, your Houndoom sure just needs some training and shaping up." But anyway, I'm gonna give you this offer for free, seeing the kind of shape that your Houndoom is. I offer you a free spot in my Blaze biome. You can leave your Houndoom here if you like. It's up to you and Houndoom. When you decide what you want, come and talk to me. And then, a Magmar would appear out of nowhere. It would say, "Magmar!" And then, the Magmar would want to battle Houndoom, being interested, sensing how strong Houndoom was. And then, Alicia would say, "Oh, I see. Magmar wants to battle you two. Houndoom. His Pokemon has always been a bit competitive, so can't blame it." Then Magmar and Ash in competition would give each other a look, and since Magmar was a male this time, Houndoom would be able to battle Houndoom. And after a long and hard battle, Magmar would be defeated by Houndoom. But Houndoom would have still sustained a lot of damage to that mere wild Magmar. Then Alicia would say, "I saw how your Houndoom did in the Everground conference. I was impressed. Now that I see that your Magmar had to put so much effort to defeat a wild Magmar, a wild Pokemon, I think it's best you leave it here. But that is your choice, Ash. It's that choice, to be exact, is your and Houndoom's choice. If you want to leave it here, leave it. If you don't want to leave it here, you can continue with your journey. Come talk to me after you've came up with your decision." And then Alicia would leave. Ash would look at his Houndoom. Houndoom would have a look in its eyes. Houndoom would be determined to stay, would be determined to get stronger. And Ash would know at this point, Houndoom wouldn't be able to get stronger with him, but would be able to get stronger with Alicia and the Blaze biome. Houndoom would want Ash to say yes. Ash would know it, and Ash would also think about it, and then he would say, "You know what, Houndoom? I think you should stay here." And then Houndoom would nod in agreement. And Ash would put Houndoom in its Pokeball, and then he would make it to Alicia. And then he would hand the Pokeball to Alicia and would say, "When I need Houndoom, I'll call, alright? Alicia would nod. Then we would see Flannery going to the wild section to try and catch a new fire type to add to her arsenal. Then she would encounter a young Magpie, and she would use her Blaziken to battle it. Blaziken, after a few blaze kicks and double kicks, would easily subdue the Magpie, giving Flannery the opportunity to catch it with some Pokeballs her grandpa gave her, and she would add it to the team. After that, Ash would leave the Blaze biome, and he would look back at his Houndoom, who would smile at him and would howl as its way of saying goodbye. And Ash would obtain Cyndaquil as normal, and he would use it to battle Bugsy. And like the original timeline, Cyndaquil's flame wouldn't be able to light, so Ash would use Chikorita. And Chikorita, despite the type disadvantage, would beat Spinarak. But during its battle with Metapod, the hard and powerful Cocoon would tackle Chikorita hard and would knock it out. Then, after that, Ash would send in his Heracross to give it some more experience, and Heracross would easily come in clutch and defeat the Metapod. After this, Bugsy would send out his signature Cypher. This battle would be long and hard, both Pokemon never giving in. It would be a back and forth, but in the end, Cypher would gain the slight advantage and would critical hit its opponent with a slash. Then, after that, Ash would send out Cyndaquil, would light up its flame, and would defeat its opponent with one flamethrower in this timeline. After this, Bugsy would tell Ash how good of a trainer he is, and how much fun he had in the battle. I would give Ash the Hive badge. After that, Ash would obtain Totodile like he did normally, but without Misty, it would be much easier for him to obtain Totodile. Anyway, Ash would battle Mickey, or Mikey, and her Skarmory. Skarmory would battle Cyndaquil using Wing Attack and Steel Wing, but Cyndaquil wouldn't be able to activate its flame in time enough to score much damage, and it would ultimately be defeated by Mickey or Mickey's Skarmory. After this, Ash and Cyndaquil would go through a long grind and training montage to increase Cyndaquil's strength and make it access its fire powers at will. After this long training montage, Ash will go and battle Mickey. This battle will be a lot more even, but then Skarmory and its speed would cause it to gain an advantage. And just when you think the Fire Mouse, despite the Fire Hedgehog thing or Quill Creature, the Fire Mouse and its the fire hedgehog, and despite its type advantage and its training, would lose. Cyndaquil would glow, and it would evolve into Quilava. I know there'll be lots of you saying, "Oh no, Quilava should evolve in the Jasmine battle," blah blah blah. As much as I also think that, I think that would make more sense for it to evolve now, because Ash did a training montage, an entire training montage with Quilava to make it stronger. I believe that the experience accumulated from that would give it enough experience, should give it enough experience to evolve during battle. But anyway, going back to the story, the moment Quilava evolved, it would learn Flame Wheel, and it would use Flamethrower, a combination of Flamethrower and Flame Wheel, to easily take the win. After this, Ash would make it to Goldenrod City and would battle Whitney using Heracross. Heracross would defeat Clefairy with ease, with Clefairy trying to use its metronome several times but only ending up using Splash and crap like that. After that, Whitney would use her Nidorina. Nidorina would battle Heracross. This battle will be fairly even, but in the end, the fighting bug type would win. And anyway, for those who don't like bad language, I'm sorry for saying crap. Yeah, I just wanted to get that out there, just in case people don't like that stuff. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Whitney would then send out her Miltank. Miltank would be a true powerhouse. Despite Heracross having the type advantage, it would easily defeat Heracross in one stomp. I should think that the power of this Miltank would be too powerful for any of his new Johto Pokemon to handle. He would think that he didn't want to use Aggron, because Aggron was his starter and was by far currently his most powerful Pokemon, and he didn't want to abuse it because Aggron was his starter, his friend, and more importantly his friend, and he had used it to win the league. But he would know that right now he needed pure brute strength to win this gym battle, so he would get out Aggron's Pokeball and he would throw it, showing Aggron. Whitney would say, "Wow, I haven't seen that Pokemon before. But anyway, let's battle." Alright. And then Ash would command for an Iron Tail. And with one single Iron Tail, Miltank would be taken down. Whitney would be shocked at the power of the Aggron. Would say, "Oh wow, Aggron of yours is powerful. Wow, I didn't see the Everground Conference. I knew it was rolling, but I never saw the Everground Conference. But from what I've heard, an Aggron and a trainer were the winners of it. And I guess that Aggron and trainer was you, Ash. I should say, you got that right." And then Whitney would give Ash the play match. After that, the business of the episode where the power plant shuts down will go as normal. But in this timeline, it would be Brandon instead of Gary. And Brandon would challenge Ash to a battle. Ash would use his Totodile, and Brandon would use his newly caught Onix. Despite Onix being at a type advantage, this battle would be long. Both Pokemon would be pushed to their limits, and then Totodile would evolve into Croconaw. And then, a few minutes later, Steelix would evolve. This battle would be long, and very even, but in the end, Crocodile would barely scrape by with a win. But seconds later, Crocodile would faint. Brendan and Ash would shake hands and would say that it was a good battle, and they would leave, with Brendan now respecting Ash. Stay tuned to see the next part of Johto. Goodbye.